Welcome to the TNT Review.
We don't like it, we'll blow the hell out of it.
That's right, if we're not scraping it off the walls, it must have been good.
Or really, really bad.
I'm Zane Tempest.
And I'm Drake Terrain.
Now for our first ever review, to try and make a name for ourselves and not bore the tits off everyone listening, we're going to review Earth Defense Force 2017.
Now this game is very, very simple, very, very enjoyable, but generally takes forever to really complete. The entire premise of this game is a B-rated Japanese film.
I'll put it as simply as possible. Giant insects, unlimited ammo, massive robots, and lots of explosions.
I'll make it slightly more complicated so you know what's going on. You play the EDF, the Earth Defense Force, as you might have guessed. Your job is to protect the world from a sudden alien invasion from a species called the Ravagers.
The mysterious 360 game appeared to have come out of absolutely nowhere. Very few people know where it came from. Fortunately for you, I do. Or unfortunately. It was released as a third in a series of PlayStation 1 games released in Japan. Because of their apparently simple gameplay and, I guess, not enough people being too interested over in America, it never got imported over here to Europe either. However, unsurprisingly, there was a European version known as Global Defense Force. Considering I only discovered this a few months ago, and the 360's been out for a few years, it's safe to say this was not a top-shelf game.
But now to talk about the game itself. Now the gameplay is very, very simple. You've got two guns, you can switch them back and forth. You fire them, point them, some of them lock on, some of them straight firing. Some are even mines. It's generally a really simple prospect.
Not to mention, unlimited ammo. You just go in, hold the trigger down, you run out of ammo and you clip, you reload. It's as simple as that. So simple, they don't even need to include a reload button. So if you see someone running around shooting at the floor, it's because they've just used a few bullets in their clip and they want a fresh one.
Which can be very difficult if you've got a rocket launcher or anything else that's highly explosive.
There are very few weapons that have limited ammunition in the game. There's about 4 or 5, most of which are special weapons.
Now, as you go through, you'll run through your basic simple weapons. You've got machine guns, assault rifles. Then you get onto the more interesting things like grenade launchers, rocket launchers, sniper rifles.
Missile launchers. Let's not forget shotguns, because they are a lot more useful than they sound.
Well, if an alien gets, 3 foot away from you, shotguns always do sound good.
Oh yeah, always a nice lifesaver. For close encounters.
And what is a good apocalypse if you don't have a shotgun to wield?
Too darn right. And then things get a bit peculiar. You have weapons such as the 0-point energy rifle, one of my personal favourites. A laser sniper rifle. Special weapon.
And then you can get on to the more interesting types of things personally. You get C2, C3, C4 bombs, and then to top it all off, the C70 explosive.
And it not only does more damage than every vehicle in the game, but it does more damage than every standard unit has health, even on the higher difficulty levels.
Of course, the best part of any game is not so much the playing of it, but the finding of the little tricks that make the game just so much more fun.
Exactly. Such as tank surfing, fun for all the family.
There is a limited amount of vehicles in the game.
You've got the hover bike, which is incredibly fast, has a machine gun, and you're only using it because it was there and you want to be very far away now.
Then you've got the power suit. Lots of weapons, high health, but about as quick as a 3-legged turtle.
You've got the tank, which prior to contrary belief is the second fastest vehicle in the game, which also has a nifty habit of setting your player 2 on the front of it and driving like the clappers straight ahead.
But before we get back to that, the final vehicle in the game is the helicopter. Basic Apache looking thing. You've got machine guns, rocket launchers and a smidge of health. Quite good for dodging, but if you do get hit you're now hundreds of feet in the air.
The good news is, however, the game doesn't have any fall damage. The only problem is it can take you a bit of time to reach the ground, in which time busy yourself by shooting blindly at anything moving.
Which can be really fun or really annoying depending on who's doing it.
Unfortunately, the game is not particularly well designed for air-to-air combat. The handling of most of the vehicles tends to be a bit sluggish. Fortunately, after about 3 hours of playing this, you usually get the hang of it. And when you consider you've only been playing it for 3 hours, that's probably a good thing. This is a game that has a habit of sucking up days at a time.
Now, back to as we were saying before, vehicle surfing. Because the outside of any tank is solid, even though in some games you'll be able to surf through one another, one of the greatest fun things we had was having one person sit just in front of the barrel, where the upper part of the tank is.
Unfortunately, the physics engine didn't allow for a character to stand on top. You have someone standing on top, drive forward, that character is now standing on thin air and falls off. So you have to lock them in place between an antenna and the barrel of the weapon.
From there, you can do things like use yourself as an extra turret, although slightly inadvisable because the tank isn't immune to friendly fire. If you get your angles right, you can still destroy it by shooting the top of it. This can leave your friend going from 20 mile an hour to nothing as he falls through the bottom and lands on the floor.
We should probably add, if you can't destroy it, it's not on the game.
The only things you can't destroy in this game is some curbs and the occasional piece of fence.
Yeah, I remember you versus the fence for 3 bloody hours.
I won.
Did you, hell? It's got the most powerful weapon in the game and blew me to smithereens before you won.
You died, I won. That's the way it works.
Oh, so true.
But all of the buildings, because you play in Tokyo, so you've got skyscrapers, large parks, everything in every direction.
Sky Needle.
All of it's destroyable.
You got an ant sitting on the top of a building over there, you got a rocket launcher. Very soon there's going to be no building, no ant and no ammo.
Which led to a rather interesting point the first time it happens. The first few levels of the game, the ants tend to swarm between buildings and down roads toward you. And then you'll get to one level in the game where they will literally just climb over anything in front of them.
Which is okay, because if you want to find the straightest path between 2 points, you get a rocket launcher and make a straight line.
Occasionally you'll be fighting something in the distance and you'll just need your partner to blow some buildings up to give you that straight line.
Explosives are the only thing that can destroy buildings, but unless you're me and decide to dual-wield sniper rifles, you're probably fine.
But back to our little fun that we had before. We played a specific level where there was a large group of enemies and they tend to follow us everywhere.
I think the appropriate term was swarm us every bloody where.
And after playing this level for, what, 40, 50 times?
At least.
We discovered we could not fight these things on a head-on fight.
No, they surround us, they flatten us, they nerf us. The end.
So we came up with a nice little tactic.
He shoots them, I run. I jump in a tank, he jumps on.
I then drive around next to him, dropping these C-70 explosive bombs.
We just wait, sit back, enjoy the ride, imagine country music in our heads, click the little button, and then unleash heavy death metal Armageddon on everything behind us.
Now to speak about the next part. The more interesting things. We've spoken about us. Next we've got to speak about them. Our enemies.
Ah, yes. Ranging from the most humble, a small, lowly ant, possibly hoping to one day advance his way through the small ant-like diplomacy of the colony. Now he's a 10-foot bloody tall monstrosity, spitting acid at you from the other side of a flipping building.
And at the other end of the scale, we have the unknown, which is, without joking or saying any innuendos, a giant robotic T-Rex with a pair of cannons on its arms that really make it look like it's compensating.
Oh, far too much so. You've also got little annoying enemies such as the gunships. They're small, they're agile, they shoot at you a lot.
They generally don't have a lot of health, but if you can hit them, you're a far better shot than I am.
Depending on what you know you're going up against, you can customise your loadout accordingly. Got a bunch of fast-moving air targets, you get yourself a missile launcher to lock onto them. Or use a sniper rifle to surgically remove enemies from the battlefield, or, in my case, every enemy from the battlefield.
But then you get some of the bigger enemies.
Or, more specifically, Hectors. We like our Hectors.
A Hector, for lack of a better term, is a giant robot with guns.
They've got a varying bunch of weapons, basically your average big walking Swiss Army knife. You've got these small cannons, which I came to call needle points, because they're great big shiny needles.
And artillery cannons, which were giant, flaming purple balls of death.
Long range, moderately accurate, all things considered. And then they've got a pair of machine guns.
Just added on the top because they could.
Oh yeah. You've got big ones and little ones. Unfortunately, you've got none as big as your head, because they're all about 50 bloody foot tall.
Now, the smaller of the ones generally always wielded the same weapons 2 times. One on the left arm, one on the right arm. Could be different, but they always had the same thing both sides.
The larger ones, on the other hand, they could dual wield. These clever ambidextrous buggers could walk around with an artillery cannon on the one hand and a machine gun on the other.
This made them very versatile, which, when you're playing a game, versatile usually means very good at killing you.
Yeah. Fortunately, we've got a bonus. You hit them with something big enough and they have a bit of trouble holding their aim.
Generally, if you can get your partner to shoot them in a very weak spot in their torso, which happens just to glow for some unknown reason, they jerk about as if you're actually shooting them.
However, after a lot of experimentation with the sniper rifle, yours truly, eventually realised that no matter where you shoot them, they take the same amount of damage. And when you shoot them in the chest, they recoil a lot. So for those of you with a very large machine gun with a lot of ammunition, half your bullets just went over their shoulder. So we found a new strategy to avoid this.
Shoot them in the foot.
That's right, you get a great big machine gun, wait for them to try and step on you, and then unload.
Because a one-footed enemy now flailing about the battlefield is rather humorous and efficient.
Especially when the machine guns are now firing in every direction that isn't you.
Along with their artillery cannons that generally, apart from the odd shot straight down, with a bit of area effect, are now useless as they're punting across the battlefield.
Right, now, for all you arachnophobes out there, I've got a real treat. How would you like to take a rocket launcher to your least favourite eight-legged beastie?
Now, the final enemy in this game, not including bosses of some degrees, is the most annoying by far.
Arguably less health, but they're much more agile. Their weapon also fires a mortar spread, which, when hit, slows you down.
And what are we generally referring to? The spider.
Oh yes, those bloody eight-legged freaks that piss us off so very much.
Now, only a few spiders in the wildlife actually jump, unless they're right next to what they're about to eat.
These, on the other hand, they tend to jump flipping everywhere, and it's very fast, it's very dangerous, and it has a habit of laying you out really quick.
But the most annoying feature about them is their attack. Now, normally you'd expect them to jump up and bite you, spit acid maybe, but no, both of those are taken up by the ants. The spiders, on the other hand, have a far more deadly attack.
Now, we all know spiders tend to make webs. These are no exception. Difference is they don't make webs between buildings to slow you down, they don't lay traps anywhere, they shoot them at you like a shotgun.
This looks like a silly string grenade fired out of the rear end.
Or a really bad night in my place.
Moving on. Either way, you'd want to avoid it. The most annoying feature about it, though, is they're the only ones with a secondary effect. When these spiders hit you with their webs, they slow you down.
Whenever you take damage, you, for a second, maybe a second and a half, lose a step. If you're running somewhere, you take a hit, you're not going so quick. But once you've been hit by a web, you are slowed down for 4 to 5 seconds. Now when you're surrounded by enemies, that is life and death.
And can we just say that we never actually fought a spider on its own?
No. Everything on this game comes in groups. Even the rarest of swarm enemies are still swarm enemies. If it's not a boss, it comes in a group.
Now, the main problem you face when you're fighting these guys is the fact that you'll get surrounded very easily.
There's a clever little trick in the AI. I cannot fault these guys for their AI because they have made this very well. Only half of the enemies ever rush towards you. The other half, apparently at random, go bugger off behind you and examine the scenery. They sit there and they're looking with incredible intensity at this building, admiring the architecture, before turning around and biting you in the arse.
Now, the flanking manoeuvre, the first time you see it, you really do think it's a fluke. Maybe they were going after some of the AI allies we'll talk about later. Or maybe they were just wandering off. No, they lay in wait for you, and generally are bloody good at it.
Now, the graphics of this game aren't the best. You're not going to see any awards for it. The buildings, when they crumble, look rather like a large Lego building you just knocked over. But I will say the AI is great. Until you're talking about the ones on your side.
We've done through the enemies, so now let's take full circle and go for the other half of the team.
Yeah, the other enemies.
Your allies.
Oh yeah, them.
Your allies are generally other members of this elite fighting force, the EDF. The only difference is, for some unknown reason, while the enemies were trained by Mensa, they were trained by McDonald's.
Everyone sees an enemy, they shoot at it. Big thing over there, me gun, we shoot, yes? Ignore that person standing in between, i.e. you and me, friends, our player. We are now being thrown across the map by the rocket launcher they just unloaded.
Generally, they are the second most annoying feature of this game, right after being swarmed by spiders, which will happen more often than not.
This is no surprise that at the beginning of most levels, me and my counterpart here, spend the first 5 minutes shooting our allies.
We like to think this is as mission mercy, because at the end of the day we're saving the world, they're trying to kill us.
Yes. They can't shoot for shit anyway. Until you get to the really high difficulties where you just need some extra fodder, they are more a hindrance than a help.
And of course, in games like this, you can't turn them off. They are with you at the start, whether you want them to or not.
One more thing. Have you ever had that aching suspicion that sooner or later you are going to die? I usually get this when I've got a Hector about to step on me. Me being a long-range fighter, when I get up close, chances are I'm about to top it very quickly. I've got full health, that doesn't matter, I'm going to die. So, what happens when you die?
You die.
You stay dead. You do not get revived. This is a very unforgiving game for those who fall. However, my jammy git of a partner here has evaded death, not only on low health, but on no health.
Yes, I went through a small stint of, after using a large set of C-70 bombs on myself, with a little trick we'll speak about in a minute, actually spent 5 minutes with 0 health. We're not sure whether this was down to me having .0 something health by the programming, or generally just a glitch in the game. But I would like to say I did get my full health back, and after having my full health I did actually die.
Yeah, it seems the case. The closer he is to harm, the further he is from danger.
Thank you.
That said, the closer you are to harm, the further you can be from danger. How would you like to be invincible for 5 seconds? A full 5 seconds where the biggest weapon in the game can't touch you. Well, you can.
The animations during this game are very, very static, including one where if you get bitten by a close-range enemy, you will fall over.
While you're on the ground,
you cannot be damaged.
So if you've just happened to lay down a few C-70 bombs, you're surrounded, you run up to the red ants, which only have a bite attack but more health, they bite you, you fall down. You get back up and there's nothing around you for miles and miles.
Because while you're lay down on the floor, you've still got the option to click the release button and just blow all your bombs to bits.
There are weapons other than the bombs that you can use as a third-person party. You can actually lay down automated turrets. They don't have as much damage as most of the weapons, but it does help when you're running away from something very fast with your tail between your legs to leave something behind invincible to shoot at them.
Now, the automated weapons are good. They're about as smart as your AI counterparts, admittedly. The only difference is you can leave them behind, they don't follow you.
Yeah, although if you leave them on top of a tank and drive off, they don't fall.
Yeah, they somehow get latched on.
This is my part in space, and I'm going to keep it, no matter what physics says.
Now, apart from the fact that they can somehow attach themselves to the only other solid things in the game, they are generally like ghosts on the battlefield. Once they're down, you can run through them, as can the enemies. So you can't make a wall with them.
Bored now, time to blow stuff up.
And for the next part, as my partner so eloquently put it, we're on to the best parts of any game.
Happy toys.
The weapons.
The weapons come in several classes, starting with assault rifles,
Shotguns.
sniper rifles,
Rocket launchers.
missile launchers,
Grenades.
and specials.
Now the special is things like the C-70 bomb and the turrets that we've spoken about before.
Flamethrowers, non-standard weapons, including weapons with ricocheting bullets and various other peculiar features that you don't think would be any use. 9 times out of 10, they're not.
Now all of the weapons have 4 statistics. This is damage, fire rate, range, and reload speed, even though the range itself isn't actually said.
For the most part, you pull the trigger and aim, that bullet's going to keep on going.
It was discovered quite early on rocket launchers are used for close-range combat and for getting rid of the nearby buildings.
Yes, as my comrade here discovered, he was much happier covered in carbon scoring than I was. I tended to stick with an assault rifle and a sniper rifle. This meant I was unable to destroy buildings, but extremely able to destroy pretty much everything moving. Him included when he pissed me off.
As is our usual tactics on the battlefield, I was 3 foot from the enemy, he was 3 foot from the next country. But we still shot everything in sight.
The weapons are simple. They start off with basic, it's a numeric damage system.
But generally, faster firing weapons, lower damage, same as most games.
The assault rifles come in 3 brands. You've got a regular assault rifle, it shoots bullets, questions. You've got the ST version, which has a lot shorter clip, but is one scope away from being a sniper rifle. Has a faster reload and much faster rate of fire.
And the RAR. This is generally the minigun version. I've spent entire levels firing this and only had to reload 2 or 3 times.
The last one in the game has 999 bullets.
And about 2 damage.
Fortunately, once you've unloaded these 999 bullets, if there's anything left on the lower difficulties, chances are you've missed.
Now, when you go through the different weapons, they generally all fit into different classes. Sniper rifles have a medium fire rate, and generally really high damage, but take a frickin' half an hour to reload.
Some of the more impressive ones, for example, the Lysander, my personal favourite, has a very slow rate of fire. The reload speed wasn't too bad, had a 7 clip, and it had 2 seconds before you could fire it. Fortunately for me, you could equip it to both slots. Fire, swap out, and fire.
Things like your reload time for individual rounds, but not for actual reloading, weren't set to only when you were holding the weapon. Slight programming error, but obviously something you'd take advantage of.
For the most part, I found shotguns to be mostly useless. Short clip, long reload speed. The occasional special one was okay, but they didn't really hold up to much of the later level high damage that you needed.
Next you have the rocket launchers. As we spoke, in straight line guns do very good damage. An assault rifle and a rocket launcher were the go-to guns for a short period.
Standard issue.
They don't take too long to reload, but you can't fire them in quick succession, not because of the fire rate, but because you've got to dodge a lot of the time while firing.
And of course, because of the variation between, you get the occasional weapon which has a 1 clip. For example, the Goliath, or the Goliath Z as our eventual favourite.
This would destroy absolutely everything in front of you.
But then you're stuck on your own reloading.
Then you're on to the next brand.
The missile launchers.
These are the homing weapons of the game. These come in a variety of different ones. Some you could literally click a button and fire 20 rounds, which will home in on everything, but do about as much damage as your assault rifle. Others, and one that we only ever fired once because apart from one shot it was useless, was the air tortoise.
Slow moving. It was very aptly named. I overtook it.
You could outrun it, but generally it destroyed absolutely everything.
The only problem is if you decided to overtake it and, as I discovered, walk in front of it.
It could still hit you. It was a very weird weapon. On to the next round, we had the grenade launchers. First few of them we got, generally we didn't think much of.
They were hand thrown. You hold the attack button and you got this great big orange arc leading from your character. What the hell am I going to do with this? I've got a rocket launcher and I'm going to throw a grenade at it?
But the later levels proved to be much, much better.
They became grenade launchers. And not only that, they became exceptional grenade launchers.
Some of them fired a large burst of rounds, coating an area like an artillery strike.
You could carpet bomb an entire area in one shot.
Generally didn't do a great amount of damage, but it did enough in the area of effect that it was great because it shot enemies in every direction.
Great way to get rid of swarms, and although it wasn't as useful against a single enemy, some of them were sticky, which meant if you walked up underneath them, as my comrade often did, and shot it up the nose,
you generally ended up a bit green, but it was a very, very good way to die.
On to another note. Movement. We've mentioned that you don't have a reload button, there's no sprint button, there's a jump button, there's an activate button.
There's a get into car button. I think that might be the activate button.
No, there was a get into, get out of vehicle button.
Oh. And then there was the second most useful feature of the game.
Dodge.
Roll.
Evade.
Elude.
If you jumped sideways, so you're facing forward and you jump to the left or right, you would do a double speed manoeuvre, allowing you to get out of damage quickly, or, in our case, run sideways up a road and overtake everybody.
Now, because the ants were generally quicker than you, you always had the option, you always were forced into the option of having to fight them head on. Once we discovered our little running manoeuvre, we can now actually focus on strategy. And this is a game where it was actually needed.
All things considered, for a playing B-movie, where you can run in, tie a lucky band around your controller, get yourself a missile launcher and then leave it for half an hour.
As someone did.
This game actually allowed you to incorporate complicated strategies to overcome the high difficulty levels.
This was certain levels you would go through where there would be what we like to call swarm points. These would be hills, literally, just big ant hills, which would spawn every so often, or every time you killed the enemies to a certain point, another group of a certain type of enemies. Getting rid of these was priority 1 in some levels.
If you didn't get rid of them, you would continuously get swarmed by the same enemies. If you're on the highest level, aptly named Inferno, and you're being attacked by red ants, those things took a lot of damage, and although they had 0 range for their attacks, when there's 150 of them breathing up your ass, you don't really care.
But back to our original, the last type of weapons in the game. Special.
Oh, so very special. For the most part, you looked at them, you wondered what was going on, you tried them out, got dead trying them out, and then you found one that would work for you. For example, a type of grenade which was in the special, called the firecracker. It didn't throw a grenade. It threw 50 of the buggers.
Straight in front of you in a large spread.
You had a shotgun. Nifty little shotgun. You go out, you shoot, doesn't seem to do a lot of damage. It has less damage than every shotgun you've got, till it hits a wall.
And then it starts ricocheting at about 3 times normal speed.
Some levels are in caves. Unloading a ricocheting weapon in a cave is spelt suicide, ladies and gentlemen.
Unless you were having a laugh and then it spelt, my god, was it funny?
Oh, funny for flipping you. I'm in the middle of it.
I know, one of the rare times we were in the wrong positions. Now, Whenever you played the game, there was only 3 things that the enemies would drop, and any enemy would drop any 1, 2, or sometimes 3 of the different items. These were health pickups, a small amount of health, or a full health.
Yep.
An armour item, which was very unique to this type of game, and of course the random weapon drops.
The armour items would give you 1 additional health to your maximum health. You start the game with 200. This isn't too bad. Enemies do like, 10 damage or something. You pick up 1 health, you've now got 201 health. Woo! Go me!
Considering the enemies in the higher difficulties do 1,000 damage, to even survive one of the smallest enemies on the highest difficulty doing damage to you, you need to have picked up a minimum of 800 health items.
Now you know where all your time goes. That's right, you get yourself an alien ant farm going on.
There are certain levels where, with practice and determination, and an elastic band strapped around player 2 because I've gone home finally after 3 days, you bastard, then you can run around the entire level to pick up all the armour.
If you want, you can get both players. Because this game is available split screen, you can get both players aiming underneath an enemy dropship, aiming up away from vital points, and just making a nice little thatchwork of fire for the enemies to land on.
That's something we hadn't actually mentioned. The dropship is one other enemy type. It is basically a large silver disc with a glowy bit underneath that would drop enemies.
Think hubcap with bits on the side.
When it opened up, enemies would drop, and there would be a large glowing panel that was the only place on the ship you could do damage to.
I'm sure by now you're seeing a pattern emerging. If it glows, shoot it.
But if you got the timing right, or if you had the right combinations, you could kill all the enemies and then just sit underneath it and wait.
For the majority, they weren't fixed. Some would move, some would stay still. There was almost no guarantee of which. However, because of the way the game was set up, you would have spawn points. At some point you would kill every enemy, and then 2 more groups would appear at specific locations, or a dropship would appear, or Hectors would mysteriously appear in location.
While playing this game and accumulating health slowly but surely, the whole point of it is to collect the weapons. The only way to do this is by going progressively, because jumping them is a bad idea, is it not? To go through each of the difficulties. You know, different enemies on higher levels would have more health, that was basic.
The lower level weapons were available on low difficulties, the high level weapons were only available on high difficulties. Makes sense, you can't get the best weapon in the game playing level 1 on easy.
But at the same time, you had to play on the hardest difficulty, Inferno, and then had to farm it because you were still picking up the level 1 items on it.
Although, there are some bonuses. For example, if you, on 200 health, you've just started the game and have a bit too much experience on it, would decide to play a level with enemies that you could effectively avoid seeing. For example, get yourself a missile launcher, stick an elastic band around your controller, play, I don't know, level 8 on the maximum difficulty, and then go off and have dinner. Eventually you'll come back and be surrounded by dead enemies because it's taken that long to reach you and you've managed to whittle them down to nothing. Oh look! High level weapon! That's it, your difficulty just got a lot easier.
But, of course, there is one set of weapons in the game that you didn't just find. Also including the most powerful weapon in the game.
Only unlocked for completing the hardest difficulty.
Of course, if you managed to complete every level on a certain difficulty, you also received certain weapons for doing it.
Special bonuses as a way of saying, thank you for sticking with it.
But, of course, this didn't mean just complete it on normal and you'd get easy and easiest.
No.
You had to go through and complete every level on each difficulty.
So, you've just completed the hardest level in the game on the hardest difficulty. You're feeling particularly good about yourself. If that's the only difficulty you've completed it on, means you've got to go back and do it all again.
Of course, if you've managed to complete it all on hardest difficulty when you start with 200 health, you're probably not going to find the others even a bit of a challenge. Now, the final part of this is we want to talk about the last weapon in the game.
Oh yes. Now, you've played this on Inferno difficulty. There's 5 difficulties levels. This is the top one. All the levels are a pain in the arse. You've got through the hard ones, the swarms, the bosses, the weird ones that don't make any real logical sense.
And the odd level about halfway through the game which is more difficult than the final level in the whole bleeding game.
Why do you do it?
The genocide gun.
This isn't a fanciful name we've given it. No, that's actually its name.
It fires a giant beam energy, which then for 100 metres of every direction you hit, kills it.
There are only 3 things in the game it can't kill, and that's because the programmers have obviously decided they don't want to make it too easy for you. For example, you can't shoot a dropship down with it. However, if you aim and shoot the dropship when it's dropping enemies, everything coming out is dead.
Although flying in every direction.
Oh yes. We didn't mention that, did we? The best way to surprise people is to drop a dead ant on them. Once they're dead, they turn ragdoll and you can punt them away with any weapon.
Now, this was a game we personally played for quite some time. We played it well together, we played it on our own, some people more than others.
100 hours.
But we played this game well, and it seemed like a very good one to start with.
The first game I ever maxed out completely.
Now we'll be coming back to you at another time, in another place, with another game.
We hope you've enjoyed listening to us for talking for half an hour. This is one game that we haven't blown the hell out of.
No, we saved that for the ants.
I am Zane Tempest.
And I'm Drake Terrain. And
This has been the TNT Review.